Hello, you beautiful people. If you are somebody that is wanting deeper intimacy or peace or clarity with your good Father, or maybe you're just somebody who wants to understand some of the practicals around how to be still, either way, I'm going to speak to all of this in this video here. And if you were to ask me what was the number one practice that helped me the most to live or at least make the shift into his light and easy yoke and his promised rest, I would have to say stillness. Stillness is the underrated practice, I'm convinced today. But stillness wasn't always comfortable or easy for me, at least in the beginning. I've shared before how prior I was so bound and stuck under the hard and heavy yoke of religion and performance Christianity. And I was the guy who was not only in the field, but I also wanted to be the MVP and also the referee. Meaning I tried to be the absolute best. I wanted to be the absolute best. Not only that, I was then refereeing everybody else, trying to control their behavior to try to make sure that they live up to their best as well. And I just cringe every time I think back to that moment. But back then, when I'm under that hard and heavy yoke and the rhythm, the pattern of that way, I would look at stillness and I would see stillness as weakness. And I saw stillness as being soft. And I saw stillness for those who just weren't passionate, who weren't zealous enough. And so for me and my performance-based, works-based mindset, I had this negative view of stillness. And so as it happens, when you're under that rhythm, that ingrained thinking of hard and heavy and fast and grind and hustle, you eventually get burnt out, you get frustrated, you get confused. And that was me. And then you realize Jesus always talks about this light and easy yoke and his promised rest. So why am I not experiencing that? And so for me, I then made that shift. And part of that shift then included being stillness. But it was so uncomfortable for me at the beginning for a number of reasons. Well, one of the reasons was because when I started to practice stillness, it wasn't quiet, things got loud. And part of that is because you're confronted by yourself and just everything that you've suppressed for so long. And I'll talk about this a bit more later. But not only that, when you are trained and ingrained to a certain rhythm and a rhythm that is often fast, to then come into the rhythm of the kingdom, I found that the rhythm of the kingdom is much slower. And so that shift can be very uncomfortable. And so stillness was uncomfortable for me at the beginning because you're letting go of an old wineskin, you're letting go of an old rhythm and pattern to then embrace the rhythm and the pattern of the kingdom. And so naturally that shift's going to be uncomfortable. But anyway, fast forward to today, and I'm living in this reality, his promised rest, his light and easy yoke, the goodness of his nature and of his life. And I can say that stillness is one of the most underrated and misunderstood practices today. And so in this video, I'm going to share three benefits of stillness. And then I'm going to give you 3 practicals that you can begin to implement in your life so that you too can either make that shift or you can just begin to settle more into the place of rest, his light and easy yoke, from this practice of stillness. So the first thing I want to say is that stillness breaks the pattern of performance and striving. Stillness breaks the pattern of performance and striving. So I almost see it as like this interruption. It's this thing that comes in the way, it interferes, it dissects, it breaks the pattern, the habits that you're used to. So like I said, for me, I was in this habit and this pattern of performance, of go, of pressure, of hard and heavy. And in order to get into the light and easy, I had to break that pattern. I had to rewire my thinking, so to speak. Stillness isn't stopping life. It's stopping the lies that drive you. So part of the lies that were driving me and this performance mindset was that it's all up to me. I have to make it happen. It's all about my work and my performance. I have to strive. I have to work hard. And yet those are all lies because Jesus says it's never about my work. It's about his finished work. It's never about my performance. It's about his perfect performance. And so now I let go of striving and self-effort to then rest into his finished work. And that's how I now begin to enjoy and receive everything that he's always desired to give us from the beginning. It's your Father's good pleasure to freely give you the kingdom. And so stillness doesn't stop life. It's stopping the lies that drive you so that you can finally rest. Stillness isn't soft. It's strength. And it's the refusal to be discipled by pressure. For so many years, I was discipled by pressure. And it's harder when that pressure is wrapped in Christian language, performance Christianity, as I've talked about. And so I was discipled by pressure. And that only led to frustration, to burnout, to anxiety, to never feeling enough. And so when I finally laid that down and I swapped pressure for peace, well, now I'm experiencing the abundant life and his goodness that he always intended for us. And so stillness isn't soft, it's strength. And it's the refusal to be discipled by pressure and to now live in his peace. And that practice for me that helped me to make that shift was stillness. Religion applauds pace, but Jesus transforms in peace. Religion says, do more, but Jesus says, come to me. And so the analogy or the picture that really helped me in my mind is the story of Martha and Mary. And so you have Martha, who was busy trying to be hospitable to Jesus. I get it. I would most likely do the same thing. And then you have Mary, who was just at the feet of Jesus, stillness. And of these two, Jesus says to Mary that Mary has chosen the better one and it will not be taken away from her. Now, he wasn't degrading Martha. He never told off Martha for what she's doing. He simply highlighted to Martha that she was distracted about many things, but only one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that better part, and it will not be taken from her. And so when I look at that picture, that story, I see Mary as a symbol of stillness, and then I see Martha as a symbol of my old life, or the patterns of prior, where it was this hustle, grind, performance mentality. And again, not degrading, but just highlighting the distractions that we can fall into when all the while Jesus is saying, come to me. Religion says, do more. Jesus says, come to me, abide in me, and I will do the work in you. Blaise Pascal, he says, all of humanity's problems stem from men's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And so stillness breaks the patterns of even reaction. It breaks the patterns of anxiety. It breaks the patterns of reacting instead of responding. Henry Nouwen, he says, without solitude, it's virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. And then Dallas Willard says, hurry is the great enemy of a spiritual life. And so the way that we oppose the enemy of a spiritual life being hurry is through stillness. Stillness breaks the circuit. Stillness interrupts and interferes it so that we can enter into his rest and actually enjoy the spiritual life, the abundant life with Jesus. If you think of a bow and an arrow, in order to have better accuracy, you have to be more calm, more still. And the same can be said about our journey with Jesus, is that in order to be more aligned and like Jesus, to only do what I see my Father doing, in order to align our eyes to see what our Father's doing, be still, be calm. Isaiah chapter 30 verse 15 says, in returning and in rest you shall be saved, and quietness and trust will be your strength. In other words, stillness. Stillness is the strength, and stillness is where we find safety. So that's the first one. Stillness breaks the pattern of performance and striving. Stillness isn't stopping life, it's stopping the lies that drive you. And stillness isn't soft, it's strength. Number 2, stillness deepens intimacy and clarifies identity. About 13 years ago, Holy Spirit said to me that my integrity in the faith is determined by my intimacy with the Father, and that my intimacy with the Father is determined by how well I understand my identity. So if you keep those 3 I's in mind, there's integrity, intimacy, and identity. And they all feed into one another. But what he said to me is that my integrity in the faith, meaning my strength in the faith, my perseverance in the faith, my strength of my good Father, comes from my ability or depends on my intimacy with the Father, oneness. And that intimacy is determined by identity. In fact, A.W. Tozer, he says, what comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about us. So the way that we see the Father will determine the way that we see ourselves, our identity. If you see and understand yourself as a beloved son or daughter, then intimacy is simple for you. It's easy for you. But if you see yourself as a slave that has to perform and meet some expectation, you will always struggle and you'll be fearful. But because we are the beloved of the Father, we can come boldly into the place of intimacy and enjoy with him. And out of that intimacy will come integrity in the faith. Identity doesn't grow in noise, it grows in nearness. And stillness doesn't just calm you, it recalibrates you. So I've experienced some of the greatest revelation, some of the greatest insight, and some of the deepest transformation in my life from the place of stillness. Because in the place of stillness, I understand, I learn more about my identity. I experience and I enjoy intimacy with the Father, abiding. And from that place, he bears the fruit in me to now have integrity, to have strength in the faith. Religion confuses identity. So we begin to think it's about earning, it's about striving, it's about performing. But Jesus clarifies identity. And he teaches us that we are fully loved, we are fully pursued, and we are fully accepted in the beloved. Religion tells you who you should be, But Jesus tells you who you already are, and you are who he says you are, not what life says you are. And so many times when we experience maybe a scenario or a problem or anxious moment come up, life can start preaching to us. But stillness helps us to break or interfere that voice, that noise, to come to the place of hearing with our good Father, and then we're reminded of what he says about us, not what life says about us. 2 Corinthians chapter 3:18 says that as we behold him, we are transformed like him. So in other words, we become what we behold. And stillness is a simple practice to behold him, to be with him, and to become like him. R.C. Sproul, he says, we are not who we think we are who he says we are. And then St. Augustine says, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until we find rest in thee, in you. So in other words, stillness is where we discover more of who we are, where we grow in intimacy, and then we grow in integrity in the faith. So that's the second one. Stillness deepens intimacy and clarifies identity with your and my good Father. Intimacy doesn't grow in noise, it grows in nearness. And stillness doesn't just calm you, it recalibrates you. Thirdly and finally, stillness heals your inner world and restores peace. Stillness heals your inner world and restores peace. And as I shared, I have experienced some of the deepest transformation in my life from the place of stillness. In fact, I've learned that whatever you and I have to work to attain, we will have to work to maintain. But whatever we attain by grace, he maintains for us. And I have seen grace do so much more than the hustle and grind could ever do in the years prior. I've seen grace do so much more. Stillness is where buried things rise and broken things mend. Stillness is where Jesus meets the parts of us we've ignored. Because here's the truth. You can't heal what you keep outrunning. When you finally lay down the performance and the striving, and you begin to practice the place of stillness, everything that you've suppressed or ignored through the grind, through the striving, through the hustle, now comes to the surface. And that was really confusing for me at the beginning when I was practicing stillness, because when I was practicing stillness, I thought I would just have this amazing peace and it would be very serene and quiet. Instead, it was noisy. It felt loud because now everything that I had suppressed was now coming to the surface and I was confronted with it. And so that's what stillness will do. It'll bring everything that we have tried to submerge, everything that we tried to hide, it brings it to the surface, not to shame us, but to heal us. In fact, religion hides your wounds, but Jesus heals them. Religion shames your weaknesses, but Jesus meets you in them. And religion manages symptoms, but Jesus restores hearts. And this is one of the biggest grievances I have with performance Christianity and religion, is that it is so focused on the external facade, on how you're performing, on how you're looking, your Sunday best. And yet all the while on the inside we're dying and we're suppressing everything just to maintain this facade. And it is such a devastation and it's such a destruction to who he's called us to be. And so your my good Father wants to speak to those deeper areas. He wants them to come to the surface and things come up to come out so that we can finally become everything that he intended us to be from the beginning. Brennan Manning says, Jesus meets us where we are, not where we pretend to be. And so you and I have permission from our good Father. We have invitation to let go of the masks, let go of the pretending, let go of the striving, the performing to try and be somebody, and simply rest in the beloved. You are his. He's already pursued you. He's already come after you, and he loves you, and then he invites you into oneness again, just like Adam enjoyed in the garden. Thomas Merton says, in silence, God ceases to be an object and becomes an experience. This is one of the most beautiful things about stillness for me, is that in the place of stillness, Jesus, theology, doctrine, Christianese, language, or whatever, it all now moves from just being this object or this nice saying or this song that you sing. It now becomes this lived experience. And it's in the place of stillness that I've experienced Jesus in ways that have absolutely transformed my nature, my heart, situations and scenarios, because he moves from just being this object to this now lived experience. And that's one of the most beautiful things about stillness, is that you get to encounter him. And I'm convinced that what all of us need more than anything is an encounter with Jesus. And stillness is one of the ways to let that happen. If you think of garden soil, soil that is settled, that is fertile soil. And that fertile soil now allows for growth. And so the same can be said about the soil of our heart, that when we allow ourselves to settle, to be still, that soil becomes more fertile, so to speak. And from that place of fertile soil, we can receive revelation, we can receive insight, we can receive clarity. But more than that, we encounter Him, we experience Him, and He forms more of His nature within us. And stillness is one of the great ways to do that. So that's a third and final thing. Stillness heals your inner world and restores peace. So here are 3 quick practical tips when it comes to stillness. The first thing I would say is to keep it simple. Keep it simple. For me, when I began, I just started with 5 minutes a day. And to be honest, that was really hard because you're so used to this hustle and grind, go, go, go mentality. To then be still, it felt like an hour to me. And so I just started with 5 minutes. And over time, it becomes simpler, it becomes easier, and it becomes more enjoyable and even more life-giving. And so I'd encourage you to keep it simple. So you can start with 5 minutes a day. And those 5 minutes might be first thing in the morning, might be in the afternoon, might be in the evening. It might be every single part of that day. And it can be anywhere. It can be in your bedroom, might be in your car, might be out here in nature. It doesn't matter where it is. It's about keeping it simple and remembering that Jesus is always relational. So religion overcomplicates these things, and religion overcomplicates prayer and stillness and reading the word. And yet all the while, Jesus makes it relational. So it's all about relational. Stillness isn't a technique, it's a table. And so one of the things that I love about Jesus is that all day, every day, 24/7, 7 days a week, every day of the year, there is a table set for us. And at that table, Jesus is always inviting us to come and be at that table. And we can come and go as we please. We can stay as long as we like. But that table is always there. That invitation is always there. And so knowing that stillness is not a technique, it's a table. It's relational, and it's all about oneness with your good Father. So that's the first one. Keep it simple. Second thing, be honest. Be honest. Tell the truth. One of the problems of performance Christianity is that we don't get honest. We have the facade, we manufacture a certain image to whatever, meet expectations, and yet all the while, your my good Father is waiting for us to tell the truth. So many times we can say the right things with our lips, but our hearts are saying something completely different. And I've found that God is often waiting for your heart and lips to become one to tell the truth so that we can finally get free. God speaks most clearly when we've stopped trying to impress Him. And so you and I have permission to be totally honest. And I always say this, you must be willing to embrace the mess. I have plenty of mess. I've had plenty of mess, and I'm going to continue to have plenty of mess. But in that mess is life. That's where growth comes from. That's where truth happens. That's where freedom happens, because I'm willing to get honest. I'm willing to tell the truth. And part of the journey of growth is to get messy. So embrace the messy, whatever that looks like, by the way. I have one particular friend who they came to their wits' end, so to speak. Just performance striving had driven them just to such a rock bottom. And here they are finally surrendering, finally being honest with God instead of just saying the things that they think He needs to hear or wants to hear. And by finally getting honest, what happened is that they ended up cussing. Not cussing at God, but just cussing in general. And the reason for that is because there was abuse growing up, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and verbal abuse. And so by her finally getting honest, that cussing was a letting go of everything that she had suppressed for decades. And so by doing that, there was this freedom. And they said they felt like there's just brand new eyes, brand new vision, like the scales are finally peeled away. Now, did they have to cuss for that to happen? I don't know, but that's what happened. And I'm not saying that everybody now just go start cussing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is that you must be willing and free to be honest, totally honest, tell the truth. And you must trust that your good Father will meet you in that to help you to get free instead of suppressing and hiding. I hope that makes sense to you. I also want to say that when there are moments of stillness, there can be lots on your mind. And many people, including myself, this has happened before, where I feel like that's a bad thing. And where it's almost like I'm trying to push all these thoughts away so that I can just finally be still. I have found the best thing to do is that when all these things are on your mind in the place of stillness, is talk to God about all those things. And I have found more times than not that it was actually Him initiating and wanting conversation about those various things. So instead of feeling like, oh, I can't be still or this is a problem, just talk to Him about all those things and you'll be pleasantly surprised at what He says to you and what He wants to talk to you in those things. So anyway, that's the second one. Be honest. Thirdly and finally, be consistent. Be consistent. Stillness is a practice. And so it takes practice. And so like for myself, it was very hard and uncomfortable at the beginning. Then it became simpler. It became easier. Then it became more enjoyable. And then fast forward today, it's very life-giving. And I see stillness now as just second nature. It's an essential and part of my journey with Jesus. So religion makes stillness legalistic, but Jesus makes it life-giving. So don't make this legalistic or something that you have to do. Remember, it's not a technique, it's a table. It's not legalistic, it's relational, and it's life-giving. And that's what he invites us into. So again, the 3 benefits of stillness. Stillness breaks the patterns of performance and striving. Stillness isn't soft, it's strength. Number 2, stillness deepens intimacy and clarifies identity. 3, stillness heals your inner world and restores peace, because you can't heal what you keep outrunning. And those 3 practicals again. Number 1, keep it simple. Number 2, be honest. And number 3, be consistent. I hope that makes sense to you. Now, if you do want help and you want to go deeper on this area of stillness, I have a mini course called The Snuggle Strategy. And this just unpacks this more around being still, what this looks like. But it's also very helpful, especially helpful for moments of difficulty or anxiety or any situations that you're facing. The Snuggle Strategy, I can definitely recommend that. So I'll pop a link to that in the pinned comment. Or if you just want help to walk out this journey into his light and easy yoke and the goodness of God in general, then you're more than welcome to reach out and come join us inside the Goodness Journey. I have a Goodness Journey online community and one-on-one coaching. And this is just helping people to live, to enjoy, to settle in the goodness of God and the abundant life that He's always invited us to live from. We don't have to keep striving and playing the game of performance Christianity. We can come to a place of deep intimacy, of peace, of clarity and oneness with our good Father, and enjoy this life with Him that He always intended us to live from in the beginning. So bless you.